Welcome back to Talking Dragon Age, the show where I talk about Dragon Age. Today we're talking about Corypheus. This episode is a little different than most others in that it's not going to be grounded in lore. I know. As much as I love to talk about lore and theories, I do have a lot to say about this, and I think it's important both for the story and for future games. Let's get started here with his voice. Honestly, I think his legacy voice was a lot more compelling. I love villain voices that go off the beaten path. The voices of the Architect and the original Corypheus were very creative, and they fit well with their backstories.
You look human. Are you not citizens of the Empire? Slaves, then, to the Dwarves? Why come you here?
I am disappointed that they went with a simple, deep, and menacing for Inquisition. This slurred, breathless speech pattern they had were just so much cooler. No disrespect to the voice actor, by the way. I think he did a tremendous job. In fact, there's one line in particular that sold me on Corypheus as a villain.
I once breached the Fade in the name of another to serve the old gods of the Empire in person. I found only chaos and corruption, dead whispers. For 1,000 years I was confused, no more. I have gathered the will to return under no name but my own, to champion withered Tevinter and correct this blighted world. Beg that I succeed, for I have seen the throne of the gods, and it was empty.
Oh, you can just feel the power in his voice there. That delivery alone made his entire presence in the game worth it. Sorry, I had to talk about that. Moving on, let's talk about how the character actually serves as a villain. I've heard many people say that he was underwhelming because he was incompetent, and I definitely understand that. However, it's important to realize that he had a solid plan. It did work. The problem was when the Inquisitor got involved and threw a wrench in his plans, he couldn't adapt, or rather, didn't want to. His pride and arrogance were his undoing, which has been done plenty of times before, so I'm not really impressed by that. But we see in future Redcliffe that even Solas couldn't stop him. We have to assume that in this alternate future, Corypheus did get to the Well of Sorrows. He successfully conquered all of Thedas. Now, this is just 1 year after the Inquisitor vanished, so I would assume that Flemeth was saving her strength and ultimately would have overthrown him, but still, he won. He would have gotten both the Templars and Rebel Mages and an army of demons and then invaded Orlais after it was torn apart by civil war. He got the knowledge of the Well of Sorrows in addition to his own magic and red Lyrium and the orb, and he had effective immortality and a dragon. Not bad for an incompetent villain. And again, the problem was that he didn't adapt after the Inquisitor got involved. I mean, for most of the game, we're really just beating him at every turn. Sure, he gets in a couple good shots here and there, but for the most part, we really just keep beating him down. But I think I realized this near the end of my first playthrough, that while Corypheus was clearly the main antagonist, he wasn't really the point of the game. He was just a catalyst for everything else going down. The Mage Rebellion, the War of the Lions, the Grey Warden's stupidity, even finding the Temple of Mythal, and, of course, the rise of the Inquisition. Resolving all those points was the main purpose of the game, and Corypheus just allowed them to happen. And, of course, set up the Ancient Elven Rebel. Now, I should talk about something that continues to frustrate me. Corypheus was introduced in the Legacy DLC for DA2. Now, that introduction may have been one thing, but then they throw Hawke in there for Inquisition as a big part of the story. If you played DA2 but didn't buy Legacy, you had no idea what was going on. Now, I was not one of those people, but I certainly sympathize with them. I also understand that Legacy didn't really fit anywhere in the rest of the DA2 story, only really making sense as DLC since it didn't really connect with anything else. However, I hate it when games expect you to buy the DLC to know what's happening in the sequel. Look at Jaws of Hakon. That is a full story on its own, and it adds a lot of substance to Inquisition. Inquisition is still complete without it, and I certainly doubt anything major will return in the future, since we kind of dealt with everything. And then there's Trespasser. Imagine going into the next game like, why is the Inquisition gone or now serving the Divine, and why are we hunting Solas? I mean, yeah, we learned he's the Dread Wolf, but how did the Inquisitor find out? And why are they fighting? Again, like Legacy, it wouldn't have made sense to just tack something like that on at the end of the main game, but it bothers me that the common player is expected to fork over more money to even understand what's happening. I also recognize that this is not entirely on Bioware, but that doesn't mean it doesn't bother me. So I think that's about it for this episode. Next time we'll get back to more theories and the like. Thank you all so much for watching, and remember, Tala Nadas.